I direct your eye to the lower left corner, a subpigment of lead tin yellow, used exclusively by Gustav Kailboth in 1879.
2 phones lit up in the back row. Then a third. A whisper snaked through the room. The name Kailboth, half spoken, half choked. The lot was estimated at $3,000. The first live bid came in at $500,000. The room leaned forward in unison.
2 million, 5, 10. Do I hear 12? 12 from Tokyo, 15 on the telephone, 20 in the room.
At 40 million, the room fell silent. Only one voice remained. A Qatari foundation. Patrick's gavel hung in the air. The hammer came down. $44,200,000. 9 minutes and 47 seconds.
Patrick, you'll run the estate salvage this evening. Minor lots, low expectations, should be quick. Let's see him fail in front of 300.
The salvage lot, where they send auctioneers to die. But I am not finished yet.
18 hours before that gavel fell, Patrick walked into the storage room, alone, to look at the paintings everyone else had forgotten. The storage room smelled of old canvas and linseed oil. Patrick flicked on the portable UV lamp, scanning the racks of forgotten lots. Earlier that morning, an internal email chain had surfaced on his screen. Subject: RE, rostrum rotation. One phrase glowed yellow: rostrum incompatible. In the staff cafeteria, Richard Hayes and Michael Stern had been less subtle. Let the salvage lot bury him, Hayes drawled. He doesn't belong on the headline rostrum.
7 years, Princeton, Yale. They still see me as a technician, not an auctioneer. Not one of them.
His fingers stopped on a small unframed canvas. Unsigned, the brushwork muted but urgent. The cataloger had barely glanced at it.
The pigment density in the lower left. It's too specific. Too deliberate for a minor hand.
The lot sheet read, European School, circa 1880, Est, 2000-3000, property from a New Jersey attic clearance. He turned the canvas over.
Old backing paper, brittle, but the stamp of a Parisian supplier, and something handwritten beneath it.
He pulled out his phone, tapping a message to Lena. Can you come to storage? Bring the spectral analysis kit. Now, the auction was 14 hours away. He had one night to find something worth betting his entire career on.
Patrick, it's 3 in the morning. What couldn't wait?
Look at this, the pigment layer in the lower left. I've seen this exact lead tin yellow mixture before. Princeton thesis, 2011, Kailboth's palette.
Lena set up the portable spectroradiometer, her hands steady despite the hour. The machine hummed, sampling photons from the lower left corner.
Spectral signature is matching. Lead tin yellow, yes, but also a trace of cobalt blue, Kailboth's typical underpaint. The curve is almost identical.
Patrick pulled up the file from his thesis. Ultraviolet reflectography of Gustav Kailboth's palette. A spectral analysis. The reference spectra lined up within 2% deviation.
Patrick, this isn't just a match. This is a lost Kailboth. If you bring this to the rostrum...
It'll ruin me if I am wrong. But if I stay silent, I am nothing. Tomorrow night, I speak.
Dawn was still hours away. He had the proof, but no one in authority would look at it before the auction. He was on his own. He printed the key spectral overlay, folded it into his suit pocket. One sheet of paper, one paragraph of science. That was his entire weapon. And somewhere down the hall, Karen's assistant was already typing the final running order, with the salvage lot scheduled to open the evening's second half. Patrick arrived before the espresso carts. The spectral overlay pressed against his ribs, a secret he hadn't been given permission to carry.
Move the salvage segment to the front of the second half. I want him on and off in 12 minutes, before the serious clients finish their champagne.
Let him handle the attic scraps. The faster he fumbles, the sooner we put a real voice on the rostrum.
He heard every word through the open door of the lounge. He didn't pause. He went to his cubicle and opened the consignor file. The lot file listed the source: Bridges Estate, Montclair, New Jersey. He'd seen that name before, on his grandmother's old pay stubs.
If it's the same house, she dusted this canvas. Every week, for years.
But the hours vanished. By noon, Karen's revised program was at the printers, and limousines were queuing on the avenue.
Patrick, we moved you earlier. Second half opener. 12 minutes of salvage. Don't embarrass yourself.
I'll be ready.
At 7:30, he stood in the wings. 300 voices hummed beyond the curtain. One folded sheet of proof. One chance. The auctioneer before him closed the main impressionist session to polite applause. A stagehand in the wings waved Patrick forward.
No backing now? Just the rostrum and the lot list.
Lot 21, a chipped Majolika vase, sold for $400. Lot 22, a water-damaged lithograph, didn't sell at all. Then a white-gloved assistant lifted the small, unsigned canvas onto the easel. The clerk read, Lot 27, European School, circa 1880. Estimate 2 to 3,000. In the side aisle, Karen Whitmore raised a champagne flute and smiled.
I will open this lot at $1,000. But first, I direct your attention to the pigment in the lower left corner. Ultraviolet examination reveals a subpigment of lead tin yellow. Matched in my Princeton thesis to Gustave Caillebote's palette of 1879.
The room inhaled. 2 telephone bank lights blinked red. A whisper started in the third row and spread like fire.
$5,000. I have 5. They're not laughing now.
At $50,000, the room stopped being polite. Hands shot up. Paddles, telephones, a woman in the third row weeping into her opera glasses.
100,000. 200. 5. I have 500,000 from a telephone bidder.
Get it. The bid leapt to 10 million. Then 12. Al-Rashid's foundation in Doha was not yielding.
I'll add one scholarly point. Caillebotte used this exact lead tin yellow only during his Argenteuil series in 1879. That narrows the provenance considerably. 15 million. 20. I have $20 million in the room. Do I hear 22?
Karen Whitmore's champagne flute hung at her side, untouched. She moved toward the rostrum, but the stagehand blocked her. The room was Patrick's now. Backstage, the headline auctioneer checked his watch, paced, and kicked a wooden crate. His slot was being swallowed.
They built this fire. Let them burn in it.
At 30 million, the bid counter blurred. The salvage lot had become the main event. And still, no one had seen the faint signature beneath the dust. At 35 million, 3 bidders remained: Tokyo, Doha, and a trembling dealer in the front row who dropped his paddle.
I'll tell you one more thing. The subpigment consists of lead tin yellow identical to the batch Caillebotte, purchased from a Parisian color merchant in September 1879. I have the receipts.
The Doha telephone representative murmured into the receiver. Al-Rashid's foundation bid 44.2 million. The room went silent.
44.2. Last chance. Any advance?
His gavel struck the block. A single crack that ended Karen Whitmore's career. 300 people rose to their feet at once. Champagne flutes toppled. A woman screamed. Backstage, the headline auctioneer looked at his watch, then swung his fist into a dressing room door. Karen Whitmore's champagne flute hit the marble floor and shattered. She didn't move. Patrick's hand wrote the figure on a Sotheby's notepad. $44,200,000. His hand was steady. The digital timer on the wall read 9 minutes, 47 seconds. The salvage lot had eaten the whole evening. As Patrick descended the rostrum, the standing ovation still roaring, Karen Whitmore was already pushing through the crowd toward the press gallery.
This sale was a team effort. I personally identified the lot's potential and positioned Patrick to maximize it. The firm stands fully behind the result.
But behind her, Richard Hayes and Michael Stern were spinning a different story. That Patrick had acted without authorization. That the cataloging was compromised.
He overstepped. We'll have the painting sequestered immediately. If it's a fake, this disaster sits on him alone.
Meanwhile, a junior staffer in IT, forwarded the rostrum-incompatible email chain to 3 news outlets. By midnight, screenshots were trending. The phrase spread on social media. Sotheby's internal email calls only black auctioneer rostrum incompatible.
Let them spin. The physics of the pigment don't lie.
At 2 a.m., Sotheby's general counsel informed Patrick he was suspended pending a full authentication. He would not be allowed on the premises.
The painting spoke for itself. I'll wait for the science to catch up.
The painting, now under 24-hour guard, was loaded into an unmarked van and driven to an independent conservation institute in Delaware.
Every detail I knew of her was in a single photo. The feather duster in her hand, the shy smile.
He caught the first train to Montclair. The Historical Society's basement held the Bridges family papers from 1953. In a brittle ledger bound in red leather, he turned to the housekeeping section and found her name, Estelle Adeyemi. Weekly dusting, $4. July 1953 entry. Dusted all attic canvases, including small landscape on shelf. And there it was. The small landscape she had touched every week for years, never knowing it would one day upend the art world. The painting had hung there, unsigned, overlooked, while a black woman from South Carolina quietly preserved it. He stared at the photograph of her smiling, duster in hand, and thought about hands that cleaned what the world later called priceless. He photographed the page, folded it into his jacket, and left the archive without telling anyone.
She deserves to be remembered, not as a footnote, but as part of the provenance.
He visited her grave the next morning, a man without a job, carrying a secret that would rewrite art history. 3 weeks after the sale, a conservator in Delaware lifted the brittle backing board. Beneath it, in faded ink, was the handwritten inscription, Caillebotte 1879 Argenteuil. The spectral analysis confirmed what Patrick had said on the rostrum. Every pigment, every binder, matched the Argento series. The painting was genuine. Sotheby's issued a press release. Authenticated. Gustave Caillebotte, Argenteuil study, 1879. Sold for $44.2 million. That same morning, the full rostrum-incompatible email chain was forwarded to the board by an anonymous source. The cover-up was over. The board summoned Patrick to an emergency meeting. Richard Hayes sat stone-faced. Michael Stern adjusted his glasses every 10 seconds.
You have 1 hour to announce their resignations or I file suit for racial discrimination. I want Karen Whitmore, Richard Hayes, and Michael Stern out.
Karen Whitmore signed her resignation letter with a shaking hand. A single tear smeared the ink. Richard Hayes protested, but the board chairman cut him off. Your resignation, Richard. Now. Michael Stern didn't even speak. By evening, Karen Whitmore was seen leaving Sotheby's with a cardboard box, no one holding the door. The board issued a second statement. Patrick Adeyemi is appointed head auctioneer for Impressionist and modern art, effective immediately. Before the press could shape his story, Patrick called the Studio Museum in Harlem. He offered to donate the wages ledger and a high-resolution print of the Caillebotte.
The painting was authenticated because of science, but it was preserved because of a woman named Estelle Adeyemi, my grandmother.
He held up a photocopy of the 1953 ledger. Every Thursday, she dusted that attic. Dusted all canvases, including small landscape on shelf. $4 a week. The footage went viral. News tickers called it the most human provenance ever attached to a 9-figure sale. The museum rushed to schedule a ceremony. Patrick hung the framed print himself, aligning it beside the yellowed ledger page in a climate-controlled case. His grandmother's signature was now museum grade. The bronze plaque read simply, "Donated by Patrick Adeyemi in honor of Estelle Adeyemi." A single white rose lay across the display case.
She cleaned a house that didn't see her. Now the world sees what she protected.
A young black boy from a school group stepped forward, tracing the letters of Estelle's name with his finger.
This painting carries 2 signatures now, Caillebotte and my grandmother's dusting cloth.
The Studio Museum kept the lights on all night. A small landscape, a $4 wage, and a reminder of whose hands build what the world calls priceless. The next morning, The museum held a private dedication. Patrick stepped up to a small podium beside the display, his grandmother's photograph on the wall behind him.
We celebrate the Kyle bot, but tonight I am here to name the hands that carried it. Estelle Adeyemi. Weekly dusting, $4. The attic where this hung was cleaned by a woman who never knew she was preserving world heritage.
He paused, then quoted directly from the ledger, now protected by glass. The 18th of July. Dusted attic paintings, including small landscape on shelf. A young black girl in the front row wiped her eyes. The boy who had traced the letters earlier nodded slowly.
This is her provenance. Not a footnote, the headline.
The museum director stepped forward and announced the Estelle Adeyemi Education Fund, an annual scholarship for art conservation students of color.
She dusted the future. Now we read her signature.
The display would travel to the Art Institute and the Getty before returning to its permanent home in Harlem. A small photograph of Estelle, smiling with a feather duster, now sat in a museum vitrine beside the signature of a master. And for the first time, the art world knew both names. Weeks later, Patrick sat in his quiet apartment, a handwritten letter on the table before him. The letter read, "Mr. Adeyemi, I saw your story. I never knew a person like me could belong in art history. I enrolled in museum studies today. Thank you."
One dusty attic, one ledger, one gavel, and now a stranger's direction has changed.
He stood, removed the frame that held his grandmother's photograph, and slipped the letter behind the glass. Now 2 keepsakes shared the same space. Estelle's smile and the words of a girl who found her own voice in that smile. Later that week, a school group visited the Studio Museum. The same young boy from the dedication tugged his teacher's sleeve. He pointed at the ledger entry. "My grandma cleans too," he said. "Did she save a painting?" The teacher knelt beside him. "Maybe not a painting," she said, "but she saved something just as important." And in that quiet exchange, Patrick's hope found its simplest proof. The stories we rewrite don't end with us. Somewhere, a feather duster still rested on a shelf. But now, the world knew to ask, whose hands held it first? 7 years earlier, Patrick Adeyemi stood in the wings of this same auction room, clutching a catalog and waiting for a chance that never came. The headline auctioneers were older, white, and polished. They never looked his way. The rostrum was a club, and he hadn't been given the password.
Princeton, Yale, a thesis cited by the Met, and I am handing out lot cards like a graduate intern.
Patrick, you are technically brilliant, no question. But the room needs a certain presence, a lighter touch.
A lighter touch. Code for not one of us.
The evening sales are a performance, Patrick. Stick to the afternoon sessions where your detail-oriented style works.
Detail-oriented. As if the pigments wouldn't tell the truth if I just spoke it aloud.
He stopped waiting for permission. He spent nights in the conservation lab, learning every pigment spectrum by heart.
One day, they'll give me a lot nobody wants, and I'll know exactly what it's worth before they finish their champagne.
7 years of silence. 7 years of waiting. And when the salvage lot finally came, he was the only one in the building who understood the colors. After Lena left, Patrick sat alone in the conservation lab, the small unsigned canvas still glowing under the UV lamp. He couldn't leave. Not yet. His fingers traced the brittle backing paper again, memorizing the faint stamp of a Parisian supplier he'd seen only in archive photographs.
This is not a maybe. The spectral data is definitive. I am not wrong.
He pulled up his thesis file one last time, overlaying the graphs. The deviation was still less than 2%.
If I stay quiet, I let them win. I'll have been nothing. Tomorrow, I speak.
He printed the spectral overlay, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. His only weapon.
Tomorrow, I walk onto that rostrum with a $3,000 lot and tell them the truth. She dusted this canvas every week, my grandmother. I am not just speaking for myself.
Dawn was graying the windows. He had no sleep, no sanction, no backup. Only the truth in his pocket. He walked out of the lab, leaving the painting under a white cloth, but his mind was already gripping the gavel as the bidding crossed $20 million. A television in a small apartment in Montclair, New Jersey, flickered with the Sotheby's live feed. The apartment's owner, who had consigned the painting for a few $100s, put down her knitting and leaned toward the screen. She did not understand the numbers, but she recognized the canvas, the small landscape that had hung in her father's attic for 60 years. She called her son, her voice shaking. "Turn on the television. I think our old attic picture is doing something." By the time her son found the live stream, the bid had crossed 30 million. He grabbed his car keys. The Sotheby's switchboard was jammed. He drove straight to York Avenue. Arriving as the gavel fell, he pushed past the doorman. "That painting came from my grandmother's house. I need to speak to someone." Within the hour, a Sotheby's representative confirmed the provenance. The Bridges estate, Montclair. The consignor's family was in shock, then disbelief, then joy. They had thrown the painting into the clearance pile with a broken lamp. Now they were multi-millionaires. The consignor never contested the sale. She only asked for a photograph of the painting to keep and a small print of the ledger page that mentioned her father's house. As the bid reached 32 million, a sharp voice cut from the back row. "Excuse me, who verified this pigment analysis? We are bidding on an auctioneer's word alone."
I conducted the analysis myself under ultraviolet reflectography, cross-referenced with my Princeton thesis. The spectral data is available.
He held up the folded spectral overlay from his pocket. The same lead tin yellow appears on every verified Kyobot from the Argenteuil series. "This is not opinion." The voice didn't respond. A senior conservator in the front row nodded slowly. The room settled.
A Parisian color merchant's invoice from 1879, which I also have, lists this exact pigment batch. It is physics, not guesswork.
The phone banks lit up again. The Tokyo bidder came back at 35 million. Then Doha.
35, 38, $40 million. I have 40.
The challenger was forgotten. The room leaned forward, hungry again. The painting was now beyond question.
Every challenge they throw only makes the proof stronger. They don't understand what I've known for 6 hours.
The bid climbed past 40, and the tension in the room was no longer about whether the painting was real, but who would own it. In a paneled boardroom, Richard Hayes stared at his phone. The live feed showed the bid counter at 32 million, and his face was ashen. Michael Stern fumbled with his glasses.
This is a catastrophe. Karen said the salvage lot would be over in 12 minutes. Now he's turned it into a circus.
Karen Whitmore stood by the window, her back to the room. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. The rostrum-incompatible email chain had been forwarded to her by a journalist. The subject line read, "Sotheby's executive called Patrick Adeyemi, rostrum-incompatible, internal email leak." The door opened. A legal counsel entered with a printed copy of the full chain and laid it on the table. "The board needs to see this." Richard tried to push the pages back. "That's an internal personnel matter. It has no bearing on this sale." The general counsel cut him off. "It has every bearing. 3 journalists have copies. This firm will be sued by morning if we don't act."
Then suspend him. Sequester the painting. We control the narrative.
The chairman held up a hand. "Number, the painting goes to an independent lab tonight, and the board will decide your standing. All 3 of you after the authentication report." Within the hour, Patrick received the suspension notice. The painting was already in an unmarked van, and the email chain was no longer internal. After the resignations, the board chairman requested a private meeting. The 3 empty chairs at the polished table were a statement. The chairman slid a single-page contract across the wood. "The Impressionist and Modern Department is yours, Patrick. Full authority, full roster."
I accept with one condition. Sotheby's creates the Estelle Adeyemi Scholarship for Provenance, fully funded, every year in perpetuity.
The chairman glanced at the legal counsel. A full silence. Then he leaned forward. "Done."
She dusted the canvas. Now her name opens doors she was never allowed to enter.
The board drafted the scholarship charter that afternoon. The press release linked his appointment to the scholarship in the same paragraph. The Estelle Adeyemi Scholarship will award full tuition to graduate students researching the unrecognized stewards of art history. At the announcement, Patrick pinned his grandmother's photograph to the podium. A reporter asked if this was revenge.
This isn't revenge. It's provenance. The Kylebots survived because of a woman paid $4 a week. This scholarship ensures we never forget hands like hers.
The room applauded. A young black staffer in the back of the press room wiped her eyes. The scholarship had its first unspoken applicant. Months after the scholarship was announced, Patrick received a letter from the selection committee. The first recipient would come from Paterson, New Jersey. She was a graduate student, first in her family to attend college. Her entry essay had been on the Kylebote sale. They met at the Studio Museum. She wore a small enamel pin on her collar, a paintbrush crossed with a feather duster. She told him she had seen the news coverage and cried. She'd never known a black person could hold the gavel at Sotheby's.
My grandmother held a duster. You'll hold a curatorial hammer one day. That's what this scholarship means. She has the same steady hands Estelle had, the same quiet certainty.
They stood before the framed ledger. Her fingers hovered over the glass, tracing the entry for the 18th of July, 1953. The circle closed. A woman who cleaned, a painting she preserved, a student who would teach others to preserve. Outside the museum, the Harlem sun was bright. She unpinned the enamel badge and pressed it into Patrick's hand. "Keep this," she said, "so you remember that the hands that dust also sign." He nodded once. That same afternoon, Patrick returned to the museum gallery alone. The crowd had gone, the lights dimmed for the night. He opened the display case and placed the small enamel pin beside the framed ledger, next to the white rose that still rested on the corner. The bronze plaque now reads simply, "Thanks to the unseen hands." Below it, the estimated date of the dedication and the name of the first scholarship holder. He stood back. The painting print, the ledger, the pin, the rose. 4 objects that told a story a single gavel strike could never contain.
A woman dusted. A painting waited. A student will teach. 3 hands, 1 line.
The gallery was silent. Somewhere in the ventilation, a faint hum, the sound of a building that keeps things safe. He left the case unlocked, as the curator had requested, so the objects could be touched by the air of Harlem. The last light through the window caught the feather duster in the photograph, making the wood handle gleam, and then the gallery lights faded to black. Not an ending, a slow, intentional blink, because some signatures don't need to be seen to be permanent. In the quiet gallery, the small landscape rested beneath a warm light. Unsigned no longer, its signature now known, and etched below it, in a yellowed ledger page, the entry simply read, Estelle Adeyemi, 1953. She dusted it every Thursday, $4. She never knew the canvas she cleaned would one day command the room. $44 million passed through those hands. But the only figure that clings is the wage. The museum kept the case unlocked, so the air of Harlem could touch the paper, an eternal preservation. Some paintings are signed in pigment. This one is signed in dust, because Estelle Adeyemi never auctioned anything, but she sold the world a second look at what it discards. And somewhere, a feather duster still rests on a shelf, watching over what the world almost forgot. The Kylebote hangs in Qatar, but its provenance lives in Montclair, in a $4 line. Some signatures don't need ink,